So speaking of GameStop, retro horror. We've been talking about the GameStop Retro initiative for like close to a year now. Blue conquers Bad Fur Day. Chrono Triggers has Madden 95 inside instead. Just total awfulness. And we always thought that the story run where they had a photographer there with people with the retro game shop or whatever you want to call it, headquarters where all the video games get mailed back to from the stores, where they put on their white latex gloves, the employees, they clean them all, and then they test them and they have them ready to go, they repair them, and before they ship them out when they're ordered. That whole story we always thought was BS, and all these the multitude of stories coming out from Reddit and people emailing me and Ian, help, friends of Ian who got the wrong game sent, or it was a counterfeit, or it was just a shoddy EEPROM cart. They're true, but we only could guess why. We only can guess why this was happening. We had no way to know the inner workings of what went on with this initiative, and I guess why they decided to go national with this retro game trade-in initiative. We had no idea. No idea until now. Because Pat, which is me, I was emailed by a former manager at GameStop Corporate. Ho 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 ho! Oh, baby! This is gonna be like sort of a story time with Pat telling the story here. I got permission to retell this story. I'm going to keep this person's identity a secret, but it looks like from what he's telling me, it checks out. So I'm an impartial reporter here. I'm just relaying information. But he does say that once this story gets found out, and GameStop does monitor these sort of social media videos and tweets or what have you, the GameStop corporate's going to know who this guy is after I tell this story. But that's not going to stop me from saying it, and he has no fear of that. Anyway, so here we go. So this is my response to him. He originally emailed me, basically saying, he said, "Hey, I know you've talked about GameStop on your show, mostly regarding the retro program and how abysmal it was. I was a sales manager down there for a couple years, running their now defunct eBay store that no one knew about. We'll get into that. And when they learned of my expertise and background in collecting and dealing, they unofficially had me work on the retro program. I left the company in April for a multitude of reasons, but I saw firsthand a lot of what went on there, and I'm willing to talk about it if you have any interest in having your fears about the processes verified. I won't go into names out of respect for the people who may still be working there, or numbers, since I don't know if they appreciate me revealing that, but I'll answer or talk about pretty much anything else, since I love the retro game community. Let me know if you're interested." Of course, I said, yeah! I mean, Ian who's sick right now, he'd love to hear about this. He'll be hearing about this, on iTunes or Stitcher or Podbean, where you can download it, or on YouTube, where you guys are probably watching this and listening to it right now. So I said, yeah! Here we go. Here's the story. Sit back and relax. He's going to go into some detail, he said, because, I quote, "There's a lot to say, and I'm a pretty fast typer. My only request is if you use any of this information online or on the show is that you let me know about it so I can check it out. I'm not trying to strike back at the company. I left on my own terms, but more so I'm trying to enlighten the retro gaming community, which I know is a very passionate bunch." Yeah. "I'll preface everything with a backstory. April 2013, I took a job with electronics buyback company called Buy Mytronics, BMT, which was owned by GameStop at the time. I was operating independently in Denver. They specialized in consumer electronics and not much else. I was responsible for handling eBay listings and customer service for their eBay store. Fast forward to October 2013, GameStop decides to ignore their contract with BMT and move the operation down to the headquarters in Texas about 1.5 years ahead of schedule. In closing the Denver ops, they had to lay off a bunch of people, but they also needed to keep some of the team there to run the thing down in Grapevine." I'm guessing it was where the retro game initiative is happening right now for GameStop. "I was chosen to go down, assume the management role of the store, and moved down to Texas in February 2014. The eBay store, which was unceremoniously axed 3 months after I left, became part of the quote-unquote re-commerce GameStop's used consumer electronics department and went on as normal. In 2015, there were rumblings that the company wanted to get back into the retro market. I personally used to be a collector/dealer and had a lot of knowledge about it, so I offered my services. At first, I actually wanted to head up the entire project, but I wasn't high enough on the totem pole yet to do that. They did, however, utilize my expertise in various ways, except when they didn't, which was pretty much the entire time. Before it launched, I expressed concerns about a couple of things. One, the testing process. The ROC, Refurb Ops Center, was a shit show. Underpaid and overworked people who get graded on very stringent things are not the people I want testing something as nuanced as retro gaming. Most of the ROC employees were very foreign as well. That's his words, not mine. I'm guessing he means maybe they were English as a second language. That's what I'm going to guess that he meant here. Nothing at all against cultural diversity, back to the story, but in my visits there, I found a disturbingly large language and understanding gap between the techs and everyone else. Pat here again. Okay, what I thought. Back to his story. Having inexperienced people working on this project would be a disaster. They assured me that everyone would be properly trained and they're the best refurb center in the world and all that other bullshit. Second thing was spotting fakes. Technically that falls into testing, but it starts before it gets to the ROC. It starts at the stores. Granted, most store employees are more likely to understand why it's important because they're around games all the time, but there was next to no store training for this shit because training costs money. Lots of money. Anyway, they did provide documentation to the stores, but it was one page buried in GSO, their online trading resource tool, and most people probably didn't care. So they assured me that everything will be fine and dandy. Great, we move forward with it. The project started as a pilot in 2 regions, I believe in New York and Alabama. Pat here, he's correct. Back to the story. It was an unbelievable success. Retro trades were absolutely through the roof when it launched, and they didn't even do a whole ton of marketing behind it at the time. It actually caused a couple problems. When you grossly underestimate need, you grossly under budget for labor and space. So the ROC was getting slammed with retro items and didn't have the people to handle it. So they brought in temps. Now you have inexperienced people training even less experienced people on something that no one at the ROC has even really mastered anyway. And it was a goddamn mess. My superiors were thrilled with the trade numbers but scared shitless of sitting on that much product. So I was tasked with selling some of it. I had a couple wholesale buyers who bought the meat of the commons and slightly better than commons, but we had the perfect outlet for the good stuff. The eBay store. I'm not sure if it was you or another retro community YouTuber who said it, but the general consensus was, quote unquote, don't buy retro from GameStop, buy it from eBay if you have to. Most people didn't know that GameStop even had an eBay store. The name was Green Gadgets from the BMT days, and it was of utmost importance that there was disconnect from Green Gadgets and GameStop for the exact reason you're probably thinking. If people knew that our eBay store was GameStop, it would bring a lot of negative press with it, and people intentionally wouldn't shop there. So we started selling some of the good stuff, and since I was running things, I tried keeping it reasonably priced. When Sculptor's Cut was going for $300, I had my team listed at $250. I wanted to provide some value to the retro community without doing that, in quotes, GameStop price gouge, in quotes, bullshit. As long as we were hitting margin goals and I was burning through product, thousands of units per week across eBay and my wholesale buyers, everything was fine. Until it wasn't. So when dealing with thousands of units per week on top of everything else we had to do on the daily, we didn't have time to check everything for authenticity. Plus, the ROC was supposed to be doing that anyway before it even got to us. Our return rate on retro was surprisingly low in the beginning, so I wasn't really concerned until a return case was opened on eBay because their Chrono Trigger booted up as Madden 93. Pat here, we covered that before. Back to the story. Uh-oh. We go through the returns process and get the unit back. Sure enough, they're not lying. During that time, a second case had opened. Another fake. I talked to someone about it who relays it to the ROC, and they make it seem like nothing at all is wrong. I took matters into my own hands. I bought a screwdriver and went through our stock of higher value things. We came up with 13 fakes. They were all cart swaps, every one of them. No fake labels or anything that would have given it away at first. From that point on, we opened every game over $20 to verify it and didn't sell any other fakes. So at least if anyone bought them from Green Gadgets, the eBay store, after the initial batch, it at least had a pseudo seal of approval on it from myself. Anyway, I bring this up to the ROC and they invite me down to check out their processes firsthand. It's as bad as you think. There are people who had no idea what they were doing training everyone. There was at least one lead there who understood Retro and everything, but it wasn't enough. They weren't opening carts. They were popping the game in and turning it on, and if anything came up, they called it good. No one verified that the fucking game that came up on the TV matched the cart. No one. I had them run through a couple buckets that they had already done and said we're good, and shit started unraveling fast. There were 4 copies of Conquer that were marked as broken because they didn't turn on. Makes sense. I asked them if they tried cleaning up the connectors. They had not. Seriously, not one person there thought to take 5 seconds and clean the damn cart. So he cleaned them. And like some sort of magic wizardry, they boot up. And one of them is fake. Not really surprised. So we continue through the bucket, which happens to have some pretty rare stuff in it. Demon's Crest is in there. Doesn't turn on. Clean it. Still nothing. I ask if anyone has a screwdriver. And they do. So why the hell weren't they using it? And we crack it open. Not only is it fake, but someone damaged the traces of the cart so it wouldn't turn on, hoping to dupe some poor sap at the store into giving them the money for it anyway. Pat here. We discussed a DuckTales 2 where that happened. Back to the story. But here's the other problem. The store doesn't test them either. They look at the label, see if there's a SKU for it, and if there are probably thousands across the consoles, we did have a big library available, and assign a value as long as it doesn't look like total shit. If there's no SKU, they'll still take it under the generic whatever console game SKUs, which was worth something like 5 cents. This made sense to do because we didn't want to say no to trades, but some games, as you know it, are not worth a whole hell of a lot. Anyway, so the store doesn't do any sort of testing or verification. It gets to the ROC, and they barely do anything with it either, and when an issue comes up, they don't know how to handle it. The whole thing was a clusterfuck. There were tens of thousands of units sitting in the distribution center, so I requested a list and requested to bring over all of the high-dollar titles so I could verify their authenticity before someone bought them on GameStop.com. Which unfortunately didn't work because they didn't send over all the titles, and people still got shit like the Blue Conquer or whichever game it was you had mentioned on the one show. I actually laughed when they sent me the list. Multiple copies of games I'd never seen before in the wild were popping up. 2 copies of Snow Brothers came over. One was surprisingly legit. The other one had the infamous reproduction label printed on it, which I believe you had brought up. Bunch of fake Earthbounds and Final Fantasy 3s in there. Various fake Conquers and other such expensive / rare titles. You name it, someone probably faked it and traded it in. Sunset Riders, Sculptor's Cut, both Evos, DuckTales 2. Someone even faked a fucking NBA Jam cart and put Sonic 2 in it. Why you do that, I don't know, but I thought it was amusing. So I go back to the ROC and offer to train people on what to look for, from the obvious reproduction label staring them in the face to how to identify the game chip using the code stamped on the PCB and ensure it matches the label, which, if you know, is the absolute best way to authenticate Nintendo carts. They asked me to write a process guide for the stores in the ROC, and I do that. Obviously, the best thing would be to spend 3 times store count to arm everyone with a screwdriver. $3 times store count to arm everyone with a screwdriver to open high-dollar carts. Too expensive / would take focus away from other things, etc. So I suggested they merely threaten it. Say, hey, this game's pretty high value. I'm just going to go in the back and crack it up and make sure it's legit. And most people are going to fall for that bluff and back out on the trade. They didn't want to do that either. So I asked about installing a console, even a fucking Retron 5 in these stores, to have them boot the game to the title screen. Nope. Their solution, tank trade values on the high-dollar, high-risk games. So unless they change something, you can literally just make shitty quality repro / fakes and trade them in for cash. I would never condone this action though, because it's the eventual end user that gets a shitty experience, and GameStop isn't going to care about eating the $20 they gave you. Pat here, and that's what we've always said the reason why you shouldn't do this. Back to the story. By the time I left the company, nothing really changed. My efforts were mostly wasted. When they expanded into the second wave of consoles, Saturn, Game Boy stuff, etc., I had various meetings to identify potential problems and stop them ahead of time, as well as point out some of the rare / high-dollar titles they can take in. And one of the things I warned them about was specifically for Saturn, imports. They had no idea that people imported Saturn games at all, let alone that someone would trade in a Japanese version of a rare US game and make bank on it, so I instructed them on what to look for regarding imports, etc. I really did put a lot of effort into trying to enhance the retro game program. Not necessarily to increase the bottom line, but to ensure that the retro gamers out there weren't getting screwed over by a company that didn't give 2 shits about them. Now that they're opening up retro to the entire base of stores, the problem is only going to get worse. unless they heeded my advice at some point and learned what the hell to do, you're going to see more stories of more angry customers getting fake games. And if that happens, at least let it be known that I actively tried to stop it. But you can't be the good guy in a $10 billion company who cares nothing about their customers or employees and only acts to increase their bottom line and keep shareholders happy. Here's a couple of anecdotal things I saw during my time there, apart from just cart swaps. Multiple 32X games tagged in as Genesis in the system. An Atari 2600 Pac-Man tagged in as the NES one. A Master System game tagged in as a Genesis title. Reproduction label. I still fucking hate this one. Wrong labels entirely. Contra Hardcore had some weird custom label on it. It wasn't Contra Hardcore anyway. Bootleg Hong Kong/Chinese carts. Various legit rare titles tagged in as generic. So the customer got 5 cents for something we sold for $100 plus. Carts that weren't even put back together properly. Missing screw, different screws, etc. So I'll go into the other things now. Sorry, this is epically long. In their mind, there's no such thing as a game that won't sell, with the exception of broken units. They truly believe that they will sell out of everything at some point and plan accordingly. The old plan for generic games was that none of them were tested because they were 5-cent payouts and weren't worth the time. So when I was there, all generics were sent to my team to be handled, which worked. I had the knowledge of what was worth anything, and past that, we sold a lot of units to that one wholesale buyer. Pat here, I'm going to find out who the wholesale buyer is eventually. Back to the story. So we always had a good release valve whenever we got overwhelmed. Past that, broken units/fakes they actually caught were just destroyed and shrunk out of a loss since they had no real economic value. When I was there, the retro game program was immensely profitable, as you might imagine. Their pre-owned sales as a whole are usually pushing 50% plus margin. I'm pretty sure that's made public to investors, so I can probably say that. And retro was very close to that. My department ran higher margins than normal due to the generics, but I think we were in the realm of 10% of all retro sale units/dollars. We were selling thousands of units a month, so GameStop.com was selling tens of thousands. I'm not sure what they do with those generics now. They probably now sell to my old buyer instead of directly through me. Since it fits in so well with their current pre-owned structure, it's here to stay, plus it artificially inflates trade units, and that'll make investors happy. For team size, my eBay team had 6 people, including myself. We had a shipper, 4 listers, and me. As I mentioned, I was unofficially part of the retro game project, but past that, we had 1 merchant on the pre-owned team, and that was it for the corporate side. At the ROC, I believe they ran 2 shifts with the lead and a few associates, with 1 supervisor overseeing everything. Though I believe he was also a supervisor of something else as well, so his attention was divided. They didn't necessarily need more people, they needed better people, and I highly doubt they ever got them. So I'll wrap this up now. If there's ever anything you want more clarification on, additional questions, feel free to ask. The bottom line is that people should not buy retro games from GameStop and should certainly support their local retro game mom and pop shops, both from the perspective of getting a quality product and not lining the pockets of greedy executives. Pat here. Thank you so much for this information. Former manager at GameStop Corporate who helped run the GameStop eBay selling team. The secret GameStop eBay selling user, as well as trying to knock into their heads at GameStop Corporate what was wrong, try and go down to the ROC, the Refurb Ops Center, and seeing that it was a shit show, trying to correct it and still not making any headway. Thank you so much. But this isn't a shock. Is this a shock to you out there? It's not. This is just confirmation of more of the gritty details of what he went through. Someone who really cared about the retro gaming community to try to turn it around. And obviously, it's fallen on deaf ears. GameStop doesn't care. Why would they care about the niche retro game market? Why would they care? To them, it's positive cash flow. It's actually more shocking, not just the not testing, the lack of testing and cleaning of carts, but the fact that they are screwing over trade-in value, giving people 5 cents for a game that could be worth $100. That is shocking to me. That is shocking. Now, this probably is a rare title that is not on their system because it's not popular. That makes the most sense. They don't have like every single game on every system on GameStop.com, so they're just going to take a game, I don't know, let's just say like I don't know, Secret Scout for the NES. They ain't going to sell that on their website, but they'll take it for 5 cents and then sell it to their secret wholesale game seller guy who's going to pick it up from them, and they're going to pay more for it, or anyone else. So that's what's going on here. So I'll find out who the wholesalers are. I'm very interested in finding out about that. And I know you didn't care about being identified and getting into trouble, but thank you so much, and hopefully nothing bad happens. You just reported the truth, and I just relayed it. So there you go, guys. There's the awesome GameStop Retro Game Initiative from the inside out.